We currently manage a little over 4.5 billion in assets that is really belongs to the pensioners. We have 80 employees, actually 85, and we work with about 19 consultants, and that's kind of our entire workforce. And before COVID, which we'll talk about, we were predominantly in New York City. Today, we are across 13 different states, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. What we really are proud of is the faith and finance intersection and how that really informs doing good with the work that we do in the ways in which we structure our portfolio, as well as doing well with financial performance for our constituency. So when I joined in 2018, what the board and Brian, my boss, wanted me to do was really build a people and culture capability for the organization, and establish a high-performing platform, which is really what you want to do in order to attract talent, retain talent, right? And make sure that you have a place where people really feel like they belong and they can contribute and they can grow. And so what I think of when I think about that challenge in 2018, my first thing was to figure out how do I bring this all together and have the organization really support the importance of people and culture. And so the 4 tenets that I have worked with my team and the organization to implement is real processes around streamlining your talent acquisition process. How do you recruit the best people and get them excited to join the organization? Then the organization development component, which is all about culture. And as you see, the second important thing there is embedding DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging into all things that are around people and culture and development. Your total rewards component is all about making sure that we have the mechanisms to pay and recruit people and also reward them for their contributions and retain, right? You want to keep good people. And in this talent market, it becomes even more challenging for nonprofits. And then finally, making sure that we are compliant with the laws and the policies of the organization so that we could be sustainable over time. And so those were the 4 big tenets that I was called to build. And I'm really pleased to say that we have accomplished most of this already over the past 3 years and continue to build upon that infrastructure that has been laid out. Now, once you are able to implement an HR capability, then you can really think about how do we start to transform the culture. And in 2020, January 2020, we got approval and budget to go through a cultural transformation journey with the organization. Little did we know that we were going to be dealing with COVID in March of 2020. And so in January, both Jim Mose and I were executive sponsors to really think about how do we align the employee experience with our customer experience and ensure that those 2 things are well integrated so that we understand what our customers' needs are, prioritize that, the mission on that what we serve, and ultimately get our employee population to be completely committed to our purpose. Well, guess what? March happens, COVID happens, it changes our entire trajectory. But instead of saying, let's hang up this project, we actually use that as a catalyst to bring our people together, because the things that leaders were most concerned about was safety, everyone's safety, everyone's wellness, right? And so we really sought the opportunity to say, how do we engage our population, communicate with them, ensure that everyone's safe, and more importantly, rally around this transformation process and project. And so that actually anchored a lot of what we did in 2020, and the results are astounding. I'll share that with you in the next couple of slides. With every project, you have to have a project charter and a project plan. And so I'm just going to give you the highlights of that, which was we were focused on building a member-centric culture. We wanted to imagine what it would be like for both members and employees to interact with the pension boards. And so we laid out a few strategies around how do we communicate, how do we educate, how do we change our cultures, how do we implement new values and align those with all of things that our employees need to be, 1, committed to, and how they behave and how we reward that. You'll see that this is an ongoing journey. Your culture doesn't change every year. If anything, it's being reinforced and lifted every year. So this is just a quick highlight of the things that we focused on in year one. The output were 5 core values, right? And these are the things that we are not compromising. And we make this abundantly clear to the entire organization. Agility, being able to pivot. And after COVID, you have to be able to be agile as an organization in order for you to thrive. Compassion. If it's one thing we know, serving ministers and the church requires a level of compassion that, frankly, it is innate in what we do and how we deliver our service. Consistency, saying what you do and delivering against that, and being sure to be clear about that with your stakeholders, internal and external. Collaboration. We know bringing diverse perspectives to every table always create a better solution, hands down. And justice. We have to be able to search for justice in all that we do and ensure our actions are aligned with how we drive a social justice agenda for the organization, recognizing that we are tied to the broader United Church of Christ denomination. And so, what I would share here is, 2020 was heavy. You had coronavirus, then you had the second pandemic, which was the murder of George Floyd, and you had Ahmaud Arbery, you had Breonna Taylor, and that kind of racism that really showed its face in 2020 really created a rally cry for our organization to not just put out another public relations statement around Black Lives Matter, but we needed to do some internal work. And so what we did was we went out, we got a consultant, actually not a consultant, Dr. Velda Love. She is out of the United Church of Christ national setting, and she does this for a living. She actually is the Minister for Racial Justice. And so we asked her to come on board and create a program for us around sacred conversations to end racism. This was powerful because what it allowed us to do is create a safe space for the entire organization to talk about racial matters and racism and white supremacy and restorative ways of taking care of each other when we deal with triggers and trauma and things that anger us around the topic. And trust me, this was a very difficult topic, but we had the executive leadership team committed, we had our board engaged and committed, and the entire employee population were ready to learn, listen, and see each other in this process. Powerful. And I strongly would recommend, if you're looking for someone who has studied this and is really proficient at driving the conversation in a way that is insightful, that is not combative, because it's a tough topic. Dr. Reverend Love is wonderful. She has just the right, I think, prowess as well as experience to work in any culture, in any organization. And so we continued our journey in 2021. We recognized that the employees were highly engaged. They really were driving the culture transformation. The senior leadership team no longer had to drive. We were behind the scenes now, having employees say, we want more of what we're doing. We believe that we are truly a diverse organization. And so we put out our first inaugural report in 2021 that illustrates the diversity and the inclusion efforts of our organization. And you can see we had another project plan, and both Jim and I continued to drive that. What was new, though, in 21 was we needed to come up with a job architecture program to really ensure that we understood how to enable career advancement, right? Job families, roles that people could see where they start and where they're headed, and so that we don't have to have a lot of turnover. Our turnover, the organization has been hovering around 5 to 9%, and that's pretty tremendous for our size. And in New York City, we've not really had a lot of turnover. I'll tell you one thing, this year, we've seen a little bit of a difference and a little bit of an uptick there, given the great resignation in the first quarter of 22. So I'm glad that we actually made the investment to create a formal job architecture program. We called Dr. Love back in 21 to really help us continue the conversations. And so what we did was create community. And we said, let's take one book and read it as an organization and have a structured way of questions and breakout sessions to talk through, what is our interpretation. If everyone knows Toni Morrison's work, she is her work was really prolific in elevating the issues around race and her own experience, and she shares that in The Origin of Others. And we looked at the word othering and how do we do it either subconsciously or we do it consciously as we interact with other people from different people groups, right? And this session was really, I think, another step in helping us to work towards creating a more inclusive and equitable work environment. And in the workplace, we know that not all cultures and ethnicities are seen as worthy. And so we are committed to taking racism out of our organization and making it a place where people all feel equal and feel valuable. And that has been our aim, and it continues to be what we are aspiring to do every day. Additionally, in 2021, most employers were really trying to tackle, are we going to bring our people back into the office? Are they going to be working from home indefinitely? How do we address that? And because we have predominantly been a New York City-based organization, we are literally right across the street from Barnard College and Columbia University on 120th and Riverside Drive. The executive team sat down and said, we have to come up with a hybrid work model because what we want to do is ensure the safety and the well-being of our people. Folks have had to work from their kitchen tables, all different parts of their homes during the early stages of COVID. So we want to give people flexibility to also come back into the office where and when they felt safe in doing so. And so we sat down, we looked at every single job and role. We looked at it as an organization, as a leadership team. We aligned on some criteria in order to make decisions on which roles are going to be primarily hybrid, meaning they can work both in and out of the office, which roles we need to be in the office, on a regular basis, and which roles can work wherever, meaning remotely, because they have the right tools, technology, and they don't need to be in the office. So that helped us to really work towards defining the future of our workforce at the pension boards. And we were able to do that really through the lens of what's the future vision post-COVID? How are we going to reemerge? What's the workforce model going to be in terms of optimizing our people's talent and in our culture? And let's make sure that, when we operationalize it, we don't take away from the culture work that we have already invested in, and we optimize collaboration, performance, and ultimately we are mindful of being a digital organization. This was the architecture of the future hybrid model, which I'm really pleased to share with you. We have today as an organization. Agility, as you can imagine, is critical. Collaboration is something that we just don't compromise. Consistency and making sure that it was equitable in how we address the roles and the people that work for us. Compassion in how we deliver the messaging to our colleagues, and ultimately, we wanted to make sure we're not just a one-fit-all for all. We are adjusting how we address this new workforce design. That ultimately fed into our diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging report. And Harvard Business Human Resources Glossary of DEI defines diversity as, the proportionate representation across all dimensions of human experience, right? Inclusion means that everyone is included, visible, heard, and considered. And belonging means that everyone is treated and feels like a full member of the larger community and can thrive. So that's why we also included belonging, because it's not just being diverse and being included, it's also about how can you thrive and show up as your full self within the organization. By the way, some of those photos are in this year's July employee engagement. After 2.5 years, we had not seen each other in person. And so we planned a week of engagement activities in the office in New York City. And I just got to tell you, everyone walked away with, I miss being in the office. I miss the human interaction with my colleagues, and I'm hopeful that we can have more on-site presence moving forward. And that was truly the strategy behind it, and it has worked. We have seen an uptick in colleagues coming back into the office a little bit more regularly than previously we've seen in the past few months. I'm giving you a preview of our report card on our first DEI report, which you can find on our website. And this year, we wanted to just take a little progress report on how are we doing based on our inaugural report, which includes a lot of the data analysis and a lot of our stories on why this journey has shaped us and why this is now so important to us as an organization. The center story features our Chief Audit and Compliance Officer, Anna Eng, who is an Asian American exec and the first female exec on the team since I've been here. And she really talks to and shares her story and journey growing up in America as an Asian American, but also as a woman in a very male-dominated culture in her home. And she talks a little bit about her experience there. And I think it is fascinating, and it's really insightful as it inspires other women to want to be part of our leadership team, and ultimately creates a path for others to follow. This is a quick snapshot of what our workforce looks like. We have about 88 employees today. As you can see, a very diverse workforce where 23% Latinx, 15% Asian, 27% and 35% white. Gender distribution really toggles by the month, frankly. And so we have males 48, females 40, and our total operating budget for personnel costs is roughly about 18.3 million. Small departments, it's a small organization, but that creates a lot of complexity. And so keeping our eye on this on a regular basis is really critical for us, ensuring that our efforts are sustained. They're not just one and done, right? And so that is part of our journey. Equity, I would talk about really briefly here, and I know I'm running out of time, is one that we are actually pretty strong on. And if you look at the levels of pay, female to male, directors are paid a little bit more, women are paid a little bit more, and we don't have a lot of multiple incumbents in one role, so this can get a little bit challenging. But I think we have a really fair way of ensuring that we are paying fairly for the same kind and level of jobs within the organization. And in 21, we brought on McLaughlin and Aon Company to do some data analysis and benchmarking work within our job architecture program to ensure that we are also looking at the market data regularly and we're staying competitive in pay. We also called back to Love in 21 to do a cultural immersion conversation with our organization. And the focus this year was on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. And we studied the book, The Myth of the Model Minority. In this deck, there are a couple of links to some really helpful YouTube videos that I feel free to use and to share amongst your different organizations. But again, this was really around looking at other people groups that we wanted to learn from, listen about their experiences, their journey here, and create, a deeper understanding and appreciation for diversity and making it an inclusive organization. I will say that we are tied to the broader church. And so in January of this year, the National Church joined a movement towards racial justice initiative. And we are a big, not just a supporter, but we are activists in sharing our own journey here at the pension boards and linking that to their movement. And it has been powerful. Based on our DEI work, last year, McKinsey acknowledged us and invited us to participate in their Executive Leadership Program and Manager Accelerator Program. And those programs are designed for for Asian Americans, Black Americans, Hispanic and Latino Americans. And it's looking at really building executive presence with diversity as the #1 objective. And I'm really pleased to let you know that we have 6 of our execs in all of these different programs starting their program this fall. And we really are excited to be considered based on our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I would share with you a little bit of data points. We are measuring year over year our composition of the workforce, our gender distribution, and making sure that we actually keep our eyes on this. But we're also making sure that we are looking at also how do we get more women on the executive team, women of color particularly, women in general, and also we're looking at the board. How is our board composed, and what can we do to influence that we have much more diversity on our board? And by the way, 7 out of the 21 members of our board are women, and I believe not a whole lot of diverse presence there, but that it has become one of our objectives at the governance level of the organization. One of the bright spots for us is we introduced a summer internship program in 2019. One of the things that I thought was really important to the organization is about building talent pipelines. And so this year we hired the biggest class, which was 10 summer interns. And as you can see, it's the most diverse class we've seen so far in terms of skill set, backgrounds, ethnicities, and disciplines in school that they've been studying. Our program is structured as a 10-week program, and it's led by a mentorship component where they have a capstone project that they deliver to the CEO and to the board in August. We just actually concluded it, and it was by far one of our most successful years, and it continues to grow each year. I will end now by sharing what we see as some indicators of success, but also share with you where we're headed next year. And so, as I talked about, the Connected Leaders Academy, huge for us in building the skills and capabilities of the next generation of leaders for the organization. It's tied to our succession planning efforts. The Summer Internship Program really has been not just energizing for the organization, but they bring such great ideas and innovation to real business issues that we are really excited about what their contributions are every summer. And we've hired 4 great analysts out of our programs over the last 3 years. Secret Conversations to End Racism continues to be about how we appreciate diverse cultures, and it really raises awareness around race related issues in the workplace. We have a much more open dialogue about that now, and we continue to expand our partnerships in how we support different parts of our ministry, our work. And recently we have expanded and hired someone in Puerto Rico to actually administer our plans and our benefits in the local Rider Hospital as well as in the local church. I will end with this, our last at the employee engagement week of activities. We asked all colleagues to define, what does belonging mean to you? And as you can see, community, acceptance, inclusion, appreciation, representation. And so this word cloud is really one that we're going to, enlarge and put in our offices, but we continue to build community as an organization. I think that is going to be the catalyst for driving DEI and B into the future. And so I say to Jeannie and to all of you, thank you for having me here today. I hope this was insightful and helpful, and I will stop sharing at this point.
Thank you, Walter. Does anybody have any questions for Walter?
Yeah, Walter, so I think you referenced a 3-year timeline. And I'm sure you talked to your peers, but they all have different types of, their approach is going to be different, right?
Right.
How they implement. So, but based on what is 3 years an aggressive timeline? Is that, how do you think about, I guess, people in your position? How do they think about the timelines? Because, cultural transformation is, that's deep.
It's the left.
Right.
It's the left.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it all depends on how ready your organization is for that kind of change and willing to embrace those changes. And the level of commitment and support you have from the executive team. So it's really about getting that buy-in, and that can take, months, it can take a year. It's all about, the credibility of your HR professional driving that alignment and commitment. But I think 3 years is, it is somewhat aggressive, but in a smaller organization, you can have quicker impact faster because you can get through a lot of the red tape, or you can really socialize and get buy-in a lot faster, depending on priorities. I know this was really important for our organization. One of the reasons why I wanted this job and I thought it was most attractive was because they were ready. They understood where they were. They understood they needed to make some changes, and they were willing to drive with me on that journey. And so it's readiness. I think, Jeannie, is really about how do you measure readiness and really get everyone on board to support that first. Because you got to lay down the groundwork before people actually understand what you're going to be tackling, right?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. I mean, what you just presented to us was overwhelming. I mean, it was huge. It's so impressive. And obviously, you have worked very hard in some tough times during COVID, having to do everything remotely, pulling people together and tackling this thing. I mean, so congratulations. I was exhausted by even watching this, reading the screens. I don't know how you did it.
Nancy, I appreciate that, and I will share that with the team. I have a really great HR team, small team, just 3 of us, but they made this their priority and their goals for the last couple of years, and we're committed. And a lot of buy-in with the execs, right? When your CEO is committed and shows up to every session, the organization is going to rally around the importance of this. So thank you for acknowledging that. I appreciate those words.
Yeah, plus I think for me, it just creates some hope for the future. I mean, you can see changes happening, and it's slow go, and there's a lot of negative out there too, but this is starting at grassroots and it's working its way up, and it will explode into our communities, into our beings, into our United States of America, into the world.
Yeah.
So I just think I just loved listening to you because you gave me hope for the future.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, we all have a role in that. No, you're right, Nancy. Thank you.
Walter, thank you very much for your presentation. I happen to be a Unitarian Universalist minister, so I'm very aware of what my faith tradition, the UUA, is doing, and we're trying to do much of what you talked about doing in the UCC. I know that they've worked very hard to achieve diversity and equity and inclusion in the staff at the headquarters, and been doing this work for several years. And the last report I saw said that they felt that overall they had achieved the balance they wanted, but were having trouble achieving that balance at the top of the organization. So I think it's interesting that both of our faith traditions are doing this work together.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Russ. The top is always the hardest because sometimes you have to wait for people to retire or move on, and because they're all great. And so what's really critical is that next level generation is diversity, preparing them, and which is what we're doing with the work with McKinsey. So no, I appreciate your comments. It's going to be an ongoing piece of work.
Okay. So on behalf of the Rotary Club of Washington, D.C., I am pleased to present you with the certificate in recognition of your appearance before us. This certificate signifies our commitment to plant a tree in your honor to improve and beautify the environment, And we will be planting a tree, and we do have GPS coordinates, so we'll be sending you the certificate in the mail and inviting you to our tree ceremony planting.
Wow, I'm honored. Thank you so very much. I really am honored, and I thank you for your time today.